I do not know who is still listening. I do not know how far this voice is going. I know the air still carries sound, and I know the old equipment in this building still puts a signal out when everything else gets flaky. So I am going to keep talking until I cannot. My name is Dr. Aaron Klein. I teach geology at the University of Arizona. I am not a military guy, not a politician, not a prepper influencer. I am a guy who grades papers, complains about committee meetings, and drags students up mountains to look at rocks and argue about fault lines. Tonight, I am in a small observatory facility on Mount Lemmon above Tucson. This place has telescopes, cameras, weather sensors, a seismometer in the basement, and an old radio bench that one of our technicians refuses to throw away because old stuff keeps working when shiny stuff quits. If you're hearing me, you probably already know something is wrong. You do not need drama from me. You need clear words. So here it is in the bluntest way I can say it. The moon is getting closer. Not over millions of years, not the slow drift people talk about in textbooks. I mean right now, over days, over hours. Close enough that the numbers stop being a curiosity and start being a threat. I'm saying that out loud and it still sounds fake. If you put this on a whiteboard in my classroom last week, I would have told the student to stop messing around and show their work. I'm not asking you to trust a vibe. I'm telling you what I'm seeing on instruments that do not care about vibes. At first, it was small. 3 nights ago, I was up here because my graduate student needed help with a calibration run. Her name is Mira Patel. She is in her late 20s. Sharp, stubborn, always has a notebook, always has a backup notebook. She does astronomy work, not geology, but we share the building and I help when I can. We were tracking a set of reference stars for pointing accuracy, then swung to the moon for a quick exposure set. Routine. Mira said, "Aaron, the position is off." Not in a panicked way, in the annoyed way people talk when something is not matching the plan. She thought the mount model was wrong. I thought the time server was drifting. We did the usual stuff, checked the system clock, checked the pointing model, checked the star field. It all looked normal. Then the moon position still came up wrong against the published ephemeris we pull from a public feed. If you do not know what that means, it is simple. There are tables and live calculations that tell you where the moon should be in the sky from a given location at a given time. People use them for telescopes, navigation, spaceflight, tides. The moon has quirks, but it is predictable within tight limits. That night, it was not. It was ahead. Not by a tiny rounding error. Enough that Mira thought we were using the wrong date. We checked another source, then another. A university server, an amateur astronomy network. A plain old printed almanac in the office that still smells like dust. They all agreed with each other. And our camera did not agree with them. You can talk yourself out of anything at 2 in the morning. You can tell yourself the mount is flexing. You can tell yourself the camera plate scale is off. You can tell yourself the atmosphere is bending light. We did that dance for 2 hours. Then we did the one thing that shuts the dancing down. We measured. We took images, timed them, compared the moon's motion against background stars. We used different filters. We used a different camera. We used a different scope. The offset stayed. The next day, I went home for a few hours, showered, drove back up, and pulled the seismometer logs from the basement. That instrument records ground motion. Not earthquakes only. It catches trucks on the highway. Wind that hits the building just right. Blasts from quarries. It also catches something most people never think about. The Earth flexing under the pull of the moon. Solid Earth tides. Your planet's crust rises and falls a little. Usually you do not notice because it is small and slow. The curve on the screen looked wrong. The timing was wrong and the amplitude was wrong. Bigger than expected. Not huge, not yet. Bigger enough that it stopped being a neat teaching moment and became a question with teeth. That evening, my phone started buzzing with messages from colleagues. Not official announcements, not press. Side texts and direct messages. A coastal geologist in California asked me if I had weird tide gauge spikes. A buddy from grad school who works in Alaska asked if I had anything on increased microseismic noise. A former student in Florida asked if I knew why the water in the intracoastal was running fast even with light wind. Those are not moon questions on the surface. Those are Earth questions. But Earth and moon are a system. If the moon's distance shifts, you will see it in water first, then in ground, then in everything humans built, assuming the rhythm would stay steady. Let me give you the basic numbers, and I'm going to speak them out because I want you to feel the scale. The moon's average distance from Earth is about 238,000 miles. That is not a guess. That is measured with lasers and reflectors left on the moon decades ago. The distance changes each orbit because the orbit is not a perfect circle. The closer point is perigee. The farther point is apogee, normal. What is not normal is watching the calculated perigee for the next cycle drop by thousands of miles between updates. That is what we saw. Then we saw the public feed correct itself back to normal values while our measurements kept drifting away from it. That is when I stopped thinking natural anomaly and started thinking somebody is editing the shared story. I am a geology professor. I have been wrong before. I have chased bad data before. I know what confirmation bias feels like. So I tried to break my own idea on purpose. I called the one person who would not let me get away with sloppy thinking. That is Hank Morales, our facilities and instrumentation tech up here. Hank is in his 50s. He talks with that southern Arizona bluntness. He fixes things with a calm that drives students crazy because they want panic, and he gives them a checklist. Hank drove up in his old pickup, walked into the control room, looked at the screens, and said, "Tell me what you think is happening, and I will tell you where you are fooling yourself." I told him. I said, "I think the moon's orbital distance is changing fast. I think the tides are responding. I think the public ephemeris feed is being scrubbed." Hank did not laugh. He did not roll his eyes. He asked one question. How would you prove it if all the internet numbers are lying? That is the right question. So we did what you do when the network might be compromised. We went local and physical. Hank dug out an old optical transit instrument we keep for teaching surveys. We used it as a reference for angles. Mira set up a separate camera system that does not touch the main network. I pulled the backup atomic clock module we use for timing labs. It is not fancy. It does not need the internet. It just ticks. We measured the moon's angular diameter across the sensor over time. That is basically how big the moon looks. If the moon gets closer, it looks slightly bigger. Normally, it varies a little each month. We were watching it change faster than it should, and not just by a hair. Then we watched the timing of moonrise and moonset drift against prediction. If the orbit is changing, the timing changes. We saw drift. We saw it again. We saw it using independent setups. At that point, I stopped calling it maybe. I started calling it real. I did not have a cause. I did not have a mechanism that fit normal physics. I had a measurement that kept repeating. If you want my best clean explanation, it is this. Something is adding energy loss to the moon's orbit. Something is bleeding angular momentum out of the system far faster than tidal friction ever could. That can happen in theory with interactions, impacts, gravitational weirdness, engineered interventions. Things I do not even want to speculate about because speculation wastes time. The outcome is what matters. The moon is coming in. When the moon comes in, tides get stronger. The tidal force scales fast with distance. It is not linear. You cut the distance, and you do not just double the effect. You ramp it hard. Water levels swing higher, currents rip faster, storm surge gets worse even under normal weather. You also increase stress in the crust. Faults that were close to slipping can slip. Slopes that were stable can fail. Sinkholes that were waiting on a trigger can open. People think tides and picture the beach. I need you to picture ports, sewage outfalls, chemical tanks near the shore, power plants on the water, bridges, barrier islands, tunnels, basements, subway lines, marinas, seawalls. And then picture those places dealing with water that is no longer following the timetable everyone built around. The first public sign for most people was yesterday morning. You may have seen it on social media before it got messy. Videos of water pulling out of harbors at weird times, boats tilting in mud, people walking where they never walk. Then sudden surges that slammed docks, comment sections full of jokes and people arguing about whether it was wind or a rogue tide. Mira was the one who pushed me to speak out. She said, if we have proof and we keep it in this room, that is not science. That is cowardice. Mira can be harsh, and she is not always wrong. So I tried to do it the normal way. I sent emails to colleagues at coastal monitoring stations. I sent a message through a university emergency contact chain. I tried to upload a short technical note to a public repository. I tried to call a friend at a local television station in Tucson who owes me a favor from a past interview. I tried to push the data through our satellite uplink because the uplink is supposed to bypass local internet routing. That last one is where things turn from hard to dirty. The satellite uplink room is a cramped space with racks and a dish control panel. It smells hot, always. Hank was in there with me because he knows the system better than I do. He brought up the link, locked to the bird, checked power levels. The little bars went green. Clean line. I hit send on a file package that included timestamps, raw images, calculation notes, and a short plain language summary. The transfer started. Then the uplink flickered. Not dropped, flickered. In and out in a pattern. A repeating pulse. Hank looked at me and said, "That is not weather." Then the terminal displayed an error message that made no sense. It said the remote server refused the connection due to policy restrictions. Policy restrictions. On a scientific data upload. Hank tried a different endpoint. Same result. Mira tried from her laptop through a cellular hotspot. The upload started, then slowed to nothing. Then her laptop lost network entirely, even though her phone still showed signal. This is where I need to be careful and honest. I do not know who is doing it. I do not know how broad it is. I know what it looked like from our end. Selective blocking of specific content, not random failure. Hank did something that made my stomach drop. He unplugged the uplink terminal from our system and plugged in a dumb test device that sends a simple repeating file. It uploaded fine. Then he plugged our terminal back in and tried my data again. Blocked. So somebody is not shutting down all communication. Somebody is filtering. Somebody decided this should not spread. That was when Hank said, "We are done asking permission." He walked over to the old radio bench and started turning knobs and flipping switches. The equipment is a mix of modern and old. A transmitter, an amplifier, a tuner, a microphone, a battery bank, a small solar tie-in, and a generator outside that we use for outages. None of it is glamorous. It is reliable. If you are hearing me, it means that part still works. Now I'm going to bring in one more voice because I promised myself I would not turn this into the Aaron Show. People trust lived experience. They trust a human voice from a place that is actually getting hit. We got our first long call about an hour after we started transmitting. The caller is Lila Chen. She is an emergency manager in Monterey, California. She found us by scanning around after her county communications got weird. She asked if she could speak. I told her yes. And I told her to tell the truth, not the version that makes anyone look good. Lila, I am going to hand you the mic. Say your name and where you are, and then tell them what you told me earlier. My name is Lila Chen. I work for Monterey County Office of Emergency Services. I am not a scientist. I manage plans and resources, and I get yelled at by everybody when there is smoke or flooding or a mudslide. I'm speaking from a conference room that has become a makeshift comms center because half our normal channels are either jammed or being routed through some automated filter that keeps cutting words out. I'm hearing my own staff on the other end, and their sentences come back missing pieces. That is not a normal outage. That is somebody choosing what gets through. Yesterday morning, just after sunrise, we got calls from Moss Landing about water pulling out hard and fast. People who live on boats were watching lines go slack. Charter captains were saying their boats were sitting wrong. Harbor Patrol went out and they came back fast because currents were running in a direction that did not match what they expected. They said it was dragging debris, and they had to fight it to get back in. We checked the tide tables. We checked the national feeds. The table said the low tide was later. The water was already low. We checked weather. The wind was light. We checked for earthquake alerts. Nothing. Then within a couple hours, the water surged back in hard. Not a wave, a push. A fast rise that made the docks creak and made people scramble. One of the older docks took damage at the pilings. We started getting landslide calls from the hills above Highway 1. Not big cinematic slides, smaller failures, but too many. Spots that normally hold through winter rain started cracking in dry conditions. That freaked out our geotech people because the soil moisture did not match that behavior. We had reports of new sinkholes forming near older drainage lines. We had a car drop a wheel into a street collapse in Marina. Nobody died. We got lucky there. Then last night, the strangest thing happened. We put out a public advisory saying we were seeing unusual tide behavior and asking people to stay back from the waterline and avoid low-lying roads. The post went up. It got traction. Then it vanished. Not removed by us. Not flagged for misinformation with a label. Just gone. People called asking why we deleted it. We did not. We reposted it. It went up again. Then the share function broke. People could see it on our page but could not share it. I do not know who is doing that. I know it is real. I'm sitting here watching staff show me their screens, and the same message behaves differently depending on the network. I heard you, Aaron, when you said the moon is closer. I am not here to argue orbital mechanics. I am here to tell you that the water is wrong, the ground is acting wrong, and our ability to warn the public is being messed with. That is not a rumor. That is my job, my county, and my people. If you are along the coast and you think this is entertainment, stop. If you can move to higher ground without putting yourself in danger, do it. If you are in a low neighborhood that floods in king tide events, treat every tide cycle as a possible flood event now, even if the official tables still look normal. If you run a facility with hazardous materials near water, you need to secure it, because a surge that hits at the wrong time can move things that are not supposed to move. I'm going to give the mic back because I have to keep working, and because I do not want to turn this into a performance. Aaron, thank you for keeping this channel open. It might be the only place some of us can say full sentences. Lila is back at work now. That is what adults do in a crisis. They do not get the luxury of collapsing. They keep the machine moving until it breaks. After Lila spoke, we started getting short bursts from other places. I am not going to put all of them on because I do not want to jam this with noise. I'm going to pick the ones that show the pattern, and I'm going to tell you what we did up here while all that was happening. Hank and I decided to build a live update board on paper. Not because paper is nostalgic, because paper does not get censored by a filter. We wrote the date, local time, our measured moon angular size, our calculated estimate of distance change relative to baseline, and notes on ground motion from the seismometer. Mira wrote down every incoming report with location, type of event, and any detail that sounded firsthand. By late afternoon today, our measurements suggested the moon's distance had decreased by a number I still have trouble saying out loud without wanting to recheck it, on the order of several thousand miles compared to where it should have been for this point in the month. That is not enough for the moon to look huge to your naked eye. It is enough to push the system. It is enough to cause the tide anomalies people are reporting. It is enough to change stress cycles in the crust. Mira asked me the question everyone is thinking, but nobody wants to ask because it sounds too big. How far does it go? If the moon keeps descending, there are milestones. At some point, tides become destructive every cycle. At some point, earthquake rates spike hard. At some point, the moon crosses a threshold where its own structure starts to fail from tidal forces and it begins to break apart. That threshold is tied to the Roche limit. I'm saying that term because it matters, but I'm not going to hide behind it. The simple version: get too close and gravity tears bodies apart. If that happens, you do not get a single clean impact. You get debris, rings, fragments, ongoing bombardment. You get a planet dealing with falling rock while the oceans slosh and the crust shakes. That is the nightmare scenario. I do not know if we reach that. I do not know if the descent stops. I do not know if this is controlled by something that can be reversed. I do know that pretending it is not happening will not keep your house dry. Hank wanted to focus on something practical. Hank always does. He said people are going to need guidance they can use, not cosmic doom. So we started repeating a set of common sense actions between updates. If you're in a coastal zone, prioritize elevation over proximity to supplies. If you have to choose between being near a store and being above surge, choose above surge. Floodwater is not only water. It carries fuel, sewage, debris, and it cuts roads. If you are inland, do not assume you are safe. Increased earth tides can trigger slope failures. If you live below a steep-cut slope, a hillside with loose rock, or an older retaining wall, pay attention to cracking, popping sounds, new wet spots, doors sticking. Those are boring signs that precede deadly events. If you're in a city with older underground infrastructure, expect sinkholes. A tide-driven change in groundwater pressure can change how voids behave. That is not theory. That is a thing that already happens in smaller ways during heavy rain and pumping events. This would be that, amplified and out of schedule. While we were doing that, Mira was checking outside reports the only way she could. Not through the main social feeds, which were getting scrubbed, but through direct messages from people she knew and through a handful of community radio relays that still pass voice traffic. A nurse friend in Norfolk said the water came up into streets that do not flood on a normal high tide. A dock worker in Galveston said the channel current flipped early and pushed barges into a bad angle. A fisherman near Halifax said the harbor was doing 2 lows inside one window, then a surge. They all had different words, same pattern. Then the inland reports started. Not from one place, from many. A truck driver outside Flagstaff reported rocks coming down onto United States Route 66, in spots that usually hold. A school custodian in Reno reported cracks opening in a parking lot and a weird shudder that kept coming in slow pulses. A woman in Salt Lake City reported her basement sump pump cycling even though it had not rained. People hear the crust groans and picture a monster. That is not what I mean. I mean you can feel long-period motion that is not a sharp quake, a slow flex, a building settling in a rhythm, water in tanks moving without wind. It is the earth being pulled harder than usual. That is not mystical. It is mechanics. At about 7 in the evening, we got a call that made Mira go pale in that quiet way people do when they do not want to show fear. It was from a guy in Louisiana near Grand Isle. He did not give his full name. He said to call him Travis. He said he was on a shrimp boat tied up because the water was too weird to run. He said the tide came in and did not stop when it should. It pushed over a road. It pushed into yards. Then it sucked out again fast enough to drag trash cans and a small shed. He said he watched the pilings of a dock twist. I asked him one question. I said, "Is the wind doing this?" He said no. He said the air was heavy and still and the water was moving anyway. Right after that, our building shook. Not a big quake, enough to rattle the coffee mugs. Hank looked at the seismometer display and said, "That is the slow wave again." He pointed at the screen where a broad hump was rising, falling, rising. A repeating pulse. It lined up with what we were seeing in the moon drift. We are not the only ones seeing it. I know that because I got a message from Dr. Isabelle Moreau in Quebec. I met her at a conference years ago. She works on gravimetry. She wrote in plain words, "Aaron, our gravity meter is showing increased lunar tidal component. Our public data portal is showing normal. Our private log is not. Something is wrong." That is when I stopped entertaining the idea that this is a local instrument problem. This is global. The moon is global. The ocean is global. The censorship, whatever it is broad enough to reach across borders. I'm going to let Mira speak for a bit because she's been doing the math that my tired brain keeps trying to avoid. She is also younger and still has that energy that comes from being pissed off. Mira, tell them what you told me and keep it plain. Mira Patel here. I am a graduate student. I study astronomy and remote sensing. I did not sign up to be a voice on an emergency broadcast. I signed up to write papers and argue about error bars. I am angry that we are even doing this. I want to explain what we are measuring without turning it into a lecture. We have multiple independent ways to estimate that the moon is not where it should be. One is its position against background stars compared to time. Another is its apparent size on a sensor. Another is the timing drift of rise and set compared to predictions that used to be accurate. Another is the Earth response, tide anomalies, and the solid Earth tide signature in the seismometer. If you are hoping this is a misunderstanding, I get it. I hope that too. We tried to prove ourselves wrong. We changed instruments. We changed clocks. We changed computers. We used devices not connected to the internet. The discrepancy stayed. Now, the part that makes me want to throw things. When we use public ephemeris feeds, some of them updated in a way that hides the discrepancy. They did not update toward our measurement. They snapped back toward the expected value. Then they stayed there even as our measurements kept shifting away. That is not how real error correction looks. That is how someone edits a number to match a story. I do not know who is doing it. I know it is happening. I know because if I pull the same feed through different network paths, I get different values. And the values that show the problem disappear faster. That means filtering. That means monitoring. That means someone cares more about controlling reactions than sharing reality. Here is what the physics says in plain terms. The closer the moon gets, the stronger the tidal effect. That means higher highs and lower lows. It means stronger currents. It means more stress cycles in the crust. The Earth is not a rigid ball. The oceans are not a bathtub. Everything has resonances and basins and weak points. Your local risk depends on your geography. Bays and inlets can amplify surges. River deltas can backflow. Soft sediments can liquefy. Slopes can fail. If you live far inland and you think you can ignore this, you still need to pay attention to slope and ground stability. Watch for cracks. Watch for water behavior that makes no sense. Do not camp in dry washes. Do not park under unstable cuts. Do not assume bridges are safe if you feel repeating low shaking. I'm going to stop there because I can feel myself wanting to spiral into scenarios. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep helping Aaron log data and take calls. If you're hearing this, and you have a way to pass it on without getting filtered, do it. Text somebody, knock on a door, say it out loud. Mira's back on the keyboards now. Hank is outside checking the generator fuel and the solar charge controller. He is also doing something else I did not expect. He is rigging a second antenna line as a backup. Hank thinks in redundancies. I wish more people did. I want to tell you what the sky looks like right now because it matters, and because it is one of the few things everyone can verify with their own eyes. The moon looks normal at a glance. It is bright. It is the moon. If you are waiting for it to fill half the sky, you are going to waste time. The change we are talking about at this stage is measurable, not cartoonish. What looks wrong is the way it moves. If you stare long enough and you have a reference point, the drift feels faster. I'm not telling you to trust a feeling. I'm saying if you have a camera and a tripod, you can do a simple time-lapse against a fixed foreground and compare it to older time-lapses you might have. The timing is off. The world is off schedule. We got a call from Miami about an hour ago. I did not put him on because he was half screaming, and I do not want to turn this into panic audio. But his details were specific. He said he works security at a condo tower near Biscayne Bay. He said the water came up into the garage ramp earlier than usual. He said the building's pump alarm started cycling, and then they lost power for 10 minutes. He said emergency alerts on his phone arrived late in blank, with the headline, but no content. Then we got one from New York, from a woman named Denise, who said she works transit maintenance. She said they were seeing seepage patterns in older tunnel segments that did not line up with the posted tide schedule. She said supervisors told them to stop speculating and keep working. She said she heard 2 different internal briefings in the same day, one saying normal tide season, one quietly telling crews to stage sandbags and pump parts. That is the theme. Mixed messages. Public calm, private scrambling. We are also getting reports of strange impacts to navigation and timing. If you do not know this, a lot of modern systems rely on satellite timing. Your phone, your bank transactions, power grid synchronization, shipping. Those satellites use precise clocks and models. If gravitational conditions change and models are being forced to pretend nothing changed, errors can creep. Those errors do not show up as a giant red alert. They show up as, why did my map jump? Why did the drone drift? Why is the cell network handoff glitching? Now I want to address the censorship piece again because I can already hear skeptics in my head saying, Aaron, you are tired and you are turning network congestion into a conspiracy. Fair. So let me give you the exact thing that made me stop calling it congestion. I recorded a short audio clip earlier tonight. 2 minutes, I said, the moon is measurably closer. Expect abnormal tides. Move away from the shore. I did not mention any scary endgame. I did not mention government. I did not mention blame. Just the fact and a practical action. Hank took that file and sent it through 3 paths. One path was a normal internet upload. It failed with a vague error. One path was the satellite uplink. It accepted the connection, then refused on policy. One path was a peer-to-peer transfer to a friend's device using a direct wireless link. That worked because it did not go through any gatekeeper. Then Hank did a test. He changed one phrase in the audio. He replaced moon is closer with tides are acting weird. Same length, same file format, same destination. That version uploaded fine through the normal internet path. The original version failed. That is content filtering. That is not congestion. So if you are trying to warn people in your posts keep vanishing, switch your wording. Say abnormal tides, if you have to. Say unexpected surge cycles. Say ground flex events. Do what you need to do to get eyes on the risk. I hate giving advice that feels slippery. I also hate watching people drown because a filter does not like certain nouns. Around 9 tonight, Tucson started having its own trouble. Not coastal, not tidal. Urban infrastructure trouble. Mira got a message from her friend Javier, who works at Tucson Water. He said they had pressure fluctuations across a few zones that did not match any scheduled maintenance. He said 2 older mains showed signs of stress. He said the control center was seeing sensor noise that looked rhythmic. That rhythm matters. If the whole crust is being tugged more strongly, pipes shift, joints flex, old cracks widen. You do not need a quake to break a fragile network. You just need repeated stress that no engineer designed for. Then the power flickered up here on the mountain. One quick drop, back on. Hank swore, not loud, just that disappointed sound. He said, "Grid is getting twitchy." He walked outside and checked the horizon toward Tucson. You can see the city glow from up here at night. It was still there. We decided to conserve anyway. We shut down non-essential lights. We shifted the main telescope to a lower power mode and kept only the tracking camera and timing system live. We fueled the generator but did not run it. We saved fuel for when we have no other choice. If you are planning for yourself right now, fuel is life, and it is also a magnet for desperate people. If you run a generator, run it strategically. Run it in the day if you can. Shield the sound if you can. Keep your exhaust safe. Do not run it in an enclosed space. People die that way in normal storms. They will die that way now too. We got a call from Japan about half an hour ago. I almost did not believe it because the route was strange, bouncing through relays. The voice was a woman named Keiko Sato. She said she was in Yokohama. She said the port was seeing water level swings that were stressing mooring lines. She said a friend in a coastal engineering office was told to stop using the phrase lunar anomaly in internal messages and use meteorological irregularity instead. She laughed once when she said it, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. That matched what Lila said in California. Different country, same behavior. Control the words. Control the reaction. When you hear that phrase out loud, it sounds dramatic. It sounds like something people say when they want the story to feel bigger than it is. I am aware of that. I'm also aware that ignoring patterns, because they sound uncomfortable, is how people miss the early phase of real disasters. So this is where I slow myself down and talk directly to the skeptical listener, because skepticism is not the enemy. Panic is the enemy. Blind belief is the enemy. Skepticism keeps you grounded when the ground itself starts acting wrong. So let me challenge my own story, point by point, the same way I would if one of my students walked into my office and told me this was happening. I would not let them get away with vibes. I would ask for mechanisms, failure modes, alternative explanations, and error margins. I am going to do that now, out loud, with you listening. First question. Could this be a measurement artifact? Could we be fooling ourselves with bad instruments, misaligned optics, drifting clocks, or software bugs that just happen to line up in a scary way? That is always the first place you look because instruments lie all the time in boring ways. So we attack that possibility aggressively. We use different telescopes, different cameras, different mounts, and different clocks. We cross-check digital sensors against optical references that do not know what the internet thinks the moon should be doing. We use timing hardware that does not sync to any network. We ran the same measurements on different nights, under different atmospheric conditions, with different people at the controls. If this were a single bad instrument, the error would change when the instrument changed. It did not. If this were a software bug, the error would snap to 0 or jump erratically when we switched systems. It did not. The discrepancy stayed smooth, directional, trending. That is the opposite of how random failure behaves. Second question. Could this be atmospheric refraction? The atmosphere bends light. Anyone who has looked at a setting sun knows that objects near the horizon are displaced. Could that be making the moon look like it is somewhere it is not? That explanation dies fast once you look at the details. We are measuring the moon at different elevations, not just near the horizon. The offset persists high in the sky where refraction is minimal and well characterized. We also compare the moon's position to background stars in the same frame, which pass through the same air. Refraction affects them together. It does not selectively shove the moon forward in its orbit while leaving everything else alone. Third question. Could this be weather-driven ocean anomalies? Could strange wind patterns, pressure systems, or long-period swells be causing tides and currents to misbehave in ways that only look lunar? This one matters because people underestimate how complex ocean dynamics are. But again, the pattern breaks that explanation. The reports are coming from different ocean basins under different weather regimes, with different wind conditions. Some places are calm, some places are breezy, some places have storms. The timing of the water movement does not line up with local weather drivers. It lines up with the same global cycle. That cycle matches the moon, not the wind. Fourth question. Could this be a coordinated hoax? Could people be exaggerating, misinterpreting, or outright lying, feeding into each other through social networks until it feels real? That explanation collapses when you look at the kind of evidence coming in. Dock pilings twisting, roads undermined, sinkholes swallowing vehicles, seismometers recording long-period motion, utility pressure systems fluctuating. Those are not viral video tricks. Those are physical systems reacting. Hoaxes do not bend steel or move groundwater across counties. Fifth question, and this is the one that deserves real respect. Could the moon be fine, and could the Earth be changing in a way that mimics lunar approach? Earth rotation changes, mass redistributions happen, ocean basins resonate, ice melts, groundwater moves. All of that can alter tides and stress patterns. Yes, that is a real possibility in theory. And if all we had were tide gauges and ground reports, I would stay in that lane longer. But we do not only have Earth response data, we have direct angular measurements of the moon that do not match published ephemerides. The moon's apparent motion against background stars is not lining up with where it is supposed to be. That points to an orbital component, not just an Earth side effect. So after pushing on all the reasonable alternatives, here is where I land, and I'm not doing it lightly. Something real is happening in the Earth-Moon system, and someone is actively trying to keep the plain statement of that fact from spreading in its simplest form. That is not a conclusion I like. It is a conclusion that fits the data better than the softer explanations. Now let me address the censorship angle without turning it into a thriller monologue, because I know how that sounds. People here control the words, and their brains jump straight to secret councils and shadow governments. I am not interested in that. I am interested in observable behavior. Here is the observable behavior. Certain terms cause transmission problems. Certain phrasing causes uploads to fail. The same data passes cleanly when described in different language. That tells you the filtering is content-based, not bandwidth-based. That narrows the field. This is not how civilian network congestion works. Congestion drops everything. It does not selectively dislike astronomy nouns. This is also not how random moderation works. Random moderation flags after the fact. What we are seeing blocks in real time. That requires systems designed for rapid inspection and response. What does that mean in plain terms? It means there is traffic management happening above the level of normal social platforms and local internet providers. It means someone has the ability to look at data in motion and decide whether it should finish its trip. That capability exists. It is used for things like national security filtering and emergency traffic shaping. It is not science fiction. Why would someone use it now? The charitable explanation is that they believe suppressing certain language slows panic. That if people see water acting weird but do not hear the moon is closer, they will assume it is a storm, wait for instructions, and not clog roads all at once. From a crowd management perspective, that logic exists. Whether it is ethical is a separate argument. The less charitable explanation is that institutions are buying time. Time to assess, time to plan, time to move assets and people quietly, time to avoid financial collapse before physical collapse. I cannot prove motive. I can see effect. Now here is where I challenge myself again. Even if there is filtering, does that automatically mean malicious intent? No. It means control. Control can be clumsy. Control can be paternalistic. Control can be done by people who genuinely think they are helping. History is full of disasters made worse by well-intentioned control of information. What worries me is not that information is being shaped. What worries me is that the shaping is crude. Blocking words does not stop water from rising. Blocking phrases does not keep slopes from failing. It just keeps people from preparing in time. While all this was running through my head, Hank came back into the room and handed me a handwritten note. He did not say anything at first. Hank is not a talker when something bothers him. He just waits until he knows what he wants to say. The note said two things. First, the backup antenna line was ready. Second, he heard something on a side channel earlier that did not sound right. Not spooky, not human, mechanical, a clipped automated voice repeating a short phrase in different languages. He wrote it down phonetically because he could not catch it clean. Then it stopped. I asked him what the phrase sounded like. He shook his head and said it was too distorted to be sure, but it had the rhythm of a system message, not a conversation, not a distress call, not a broadcast for people, a machine talking to machines. That matters because it fits the rest of the picture. When you hear automated voices on channels not meant for public traffic, it usually means network management, synchronization, control signals. The kind of thing that runs quietly in the background when systems are rerouting or prioritizing data. I'm telling you this not to scare you, but to be precise. This does not feel chaotic. It feels organized. And organized responses do not appear unless someone believes there is a real problem worth managing. I am not going to tell you it is aliens. I am not going to tell you there is a secret base pushing the moon with a giant machine. Those ideas waste time and rot good skepticism. I'm telling you there is structured control in the noise, and that structure suggests coordination beyond normal civilian systems. If you strip away the drama, the implication is simple. People with access to high-level monitoring saw this early. They decided to manage the flow of information. They did not decide to stop the moon. They decided to manage humans. That brings me to the uncomfortable human part. When authorities manage information during a crisis, they often underestimate how fast physical reality outruns messaging. Water does not care about press releases. Rock does not wait for permission to fall. Groundwater does not read policy memos. By the time people are allowed to say the plain truth, the window for calm preparation is often gone. What is left is reaction. Reaction is loud, inefficient, and dangerous. That is why I am still here, talking into a microphone that should have been retired 10 years ago, powered by a system that does not care what words I use. I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm trying to shorten the gap between cause and understanding. If I am wrong, then the worst outcome is that people took flooding and ground instability seriously for a few days and nothing catastrophic happened. If I am right, and people wait because the official story stayed calm, then the cost is measured in lives. So that is my position, laid bare, challenged from the inside, and still standing. Something real is happening. The Earth-Moon system is not behaving normally. The response from information systems is not behaving normally. Those two facts together matter more than any theory about why. Hank is back at the console now, adjusting levels, watching meters. Mira is still writing, still calculating, still refusing to look away. Outside, the mountain is quiet, in the way it gets before weather or before something breaks. And I am still here, talking to you, because talking is the one thing they have not managed to shut down yet. At 10:30 tonight, the mountain shook again. This one was stronger. Not enough to throw you off your feet. Enough that the ceiling panels clicked. Mira grabbed the desk edge without thinking, then let go when it passed. Hank looked at the seismometer and said, "That one has teeth." We checked the public earthquake feed. It showed nothing for our area. Then 5 minutes later it showed a small event, but the timestamp was wrong by almost an hour. Mira stared at it and said, "That is not latency, that is edited." If you live in quake country, you already know the drill. Keep shoes by your bed, know how to shut off gas, know where your exits are. Secure tall furniture. If you live somewhere that rarely gets quakes, do not assume you are immune. Stress shifts can trigger events on faults that have been quiet. Also, small quakes can still damage old masonry, brittle pipes, and slopes. We are getting more sinkhole reports now. Florida, Kentucky, parts of Texas. Places with karst geology. where the ground has voids and caves. Those voids can collapse when water tables shift. Tides do not only move oceans, they push and pull groundwater near coasts and even farther inland through connected systems. Increase the pull, increase the pressure cycling, increase the odds that a weak roof gives way. If you are in a region you're known for sinkholes, stay away from fresh depressions. Do not stand at the edge to look down. Do not drive around barriers. A hole can expand. Ground can undercut beyond the visible break. This is boring advice, and boring advice saves lives. I want to tell you what we are doing now, in real time, because this is not a movie, and we are not heroes. We are 3 people in a building trying to keep a signal alive and keep our own heads straight. Mira is running a measurement cycle every 15 minutes. Capture, timestamp, compute, log. Hank is checking power, checking connectors, keeping the transmitter stable, checking the generator without running it, and going outside to listen for vehicles. I am taking calls when we can, filtering out the ones that sound third-hand or hysterical, and putting through the ones that sound first-hand and specific. I'm also writing down names when people consent, because history matters, and because if this gets worse, families will want proof that their person spoke. I have Lila Chen, Monterey County, in ink. I have Keiko Sato, Yokohama, in ink. I have Travis Grandisle in ink. If we lose power, that notebook survives. We just got another call I'm going to put on because it fills in an inland picture. The caller is a man named Robert Alvarez. He says he is a civil engineer in Denver. He says he is speaking from his truck because his office network started blocking keywords. He asked to speak in one long run because he is afraid the connection will drop. I told him, go ahead. Robert, talk. My name is Robert Alvarez. I work as a civil engineer in Denver, Colorado. I focus on foundations and utilities, mostly boring stuff that never makes the news unless it fails. I'm speaking in my truck parked near a site because I do not trust the office system. A few of us tried to send a memo up the chain about strange ground behavior, and the email bounced with a compliance message. Then my supervisor pulled me aside and told me to stop typing the word moon in company communications. That is not a normal instruction in my job. Here is what I have seen. Over the past 2 days, we have had an increase in small settlement complaints in areas that are not new builds. Sidewalk gaps opening, doors sticking, cracks at drywall corners. Those things happen normally, but the pattern is weird. It is showing up in clusters on similar soil types. We also got 2 reports of manhole frames shifting in a way that suggests the underlying bedding moved. Today we had an incident on a project near the South Platte where a trench started sloughing even though we had it shored, and the soil moisture did not match that behavior. The crew described a slow heave, then a release. No one got hurt because we are strict about trench safety. If we had been sloppy, somebody would have been buried. I also have friends in wastewater operations. They are seeing unusual inflow and infiltration spikes at times that do not line up with rainfall. That means groundwater is pushing into old joints. That happens when the water table moves. The water table is moving. I am not calling this proof of lunar descent. I'm saying the ground system is being stressed in a rhythmic way. I can see it in the way complaints and sensor anomalies cluster around the same time windows. If the moon pull is stronger, you would expect those cyclic stresses to get stronger. That is consistent with what I am seeing. Now the part that makes me mad. The city put out a generic notice about routine utility maintenance and told people not to worry about water discoloration and pressure changes. That might be partly true. There is always maintenance. But I know what I am hearing from operators privately, and they are staging pumps and bypass equipment in a way you do not do for routine. They are preparing for breaks. If you are listening and you manage a building, check your basement, check your sump, check your foundation drains, and do not ignore new seepage. If you live near a riverbank with soft soil, do not assume it holds because it held last month. Banks fail when pore pressures change. I'm going to cut it there because I need to drive and I do not want to crash while talking. Thank you for keeping this open. If this is real, the best thing people can do is stop pretending that systems are stable. They are not. Robert is gone. The signal held. That is the theme across every report. Rhythmic stress, off-schedule water, and someone trying to keep the narrative inside normal. Now I am going to say something that might save you time and maybe save you from making a bad decision. Do not drive to the coast to see it. Do not put your family in a car and chase a dramatic shoreline moment. If you are already in a safe spot, stay. The most dangerous part of disasters is movement during uncertainty. Roads clog, bridges get stressed, people make reckless choices. Emergency services get pinned. If you are in a vulnerable coastal zone and you can relocate inland to a friend's place, do it early and calmly. Bring water, bring medicine, bring documents. Bring chargers, bring sturdy shoes. Bring a basic first aid kit. Keep it simple and real. If you are in a high-rise near water, do not assume height saves you if your access routes flood. You can end up trapped in a tower with no elevator, no water pressure, no working fire suppression, and a garage full of salt water. Height is not the same as safety. Access matters. Supplies matter. It is close to midnight now up here. The moon is bright outside the dome slit. Hank stepped out a minute ago and came back with a look I do not love. He said the wind changed fast, and the trees are making that rubbing sound that happens when a front moves in. Weather is not the driver of this crisis, but weather will stack on top of it and make everything worse. Mira just ran the latest numbers. She slid the notebook toward me and tapped the line with her pen. The trend is still going the wrong way. It is not slowing. If anything, it looks a little steeper than 6 hours ago. I am going to keep talking as long as we have power. I am also going to tell you the hard thing that I do not want to tell my own mother. If the descent keeps accelerating, coastal evacuation will become impossible in a lot of places. Not because people are lazy, because infrastructure will fail. Roads will flood. Bridges will close. Fuel will run out. People will panic. That is how it goes. If you are on the fence, move sooner rather than later. If you are staying, then commit to staying and prepare for water intrusion, isolation, and repeated ground motion. Do not half stay and half go. That gets people killed. Now, one more update on censorship. We tried again to push data out, not as moon descent, but as tide anomaly data set. It uploaded. Then we tried a second upload with the exact same data, but with a file name that included the word lunar. Blocked. That is where we are. Someone is filtering by language. That means you can route around it by changing language. That is ugly, but it is real. If you have to talk about this in a way that gets through, do it. If you speak Spanish, tell your family las mareas están fuera de horario and alejate del agua, and do not waste time debating the cause. If you speak any language, use the one that your network seems less likely to filter. I hate that I am saying that out loud. I hate living in a world where that is survival advice. Hank just told me something else. He has a friend in Pima County Sheriff Communications. Not official, a friend. The friend said they were told to prepare for multi-jurisdictional coastal refugee movement. That is a phrase that does not come from a normal storm briefing in southern Arizona. That is a phrase that suggests somebody up the chain expects mass displacement. So there it is. People in power know. They are preparing quietly. They are trying to keep the first wave of reaction from happening all at once. Maybe they think that prevents panic. Maybe they think it preserves order. Maybe they think they can fix it. I do not know their motive. I know the effect. People lose time. The building just shook again while I was saying that. A slow roll. Hank looked at the seismometer and nodded once, tight. Mira did not even look up. She just wrote the time down and kept measuring. If you are still with me, I am going to keep the next part practical. What do you do in the next 12 hours if you are unsure? 1. Get water. Not because the moon steals water. Because utilities break under stress. And because flooding contaminates supplies. Fill clean containers now. Bathtub, jugs, whatever you have. 2. Charge devices. Power banks, phones, radios. If you have a car, keep it fueled. Do not assume gas stations will work if the grid flickers. 3. Identify your safe high ground, not a little higher. I mean above known flood zones. If you do not know them, look at past storm surge maps and king tide maps for your area. Use the worst one. Add margin. 4. Avoid cliffs and unstable slopes. If you are camping on a bluff, leave. If you are living under a steep cut, sleep in the part of the house farthest from it if you cannot leave. Keep an exit path clear. 5. If you have family members who will refuse to believe anything unless they hear a calm voice, be that calm voice. Do not lead with "the moon is falling." Lead with "water levels and ground conditions are unstable and people are seeing damage. So I want you away from the shoreline and I want you ready for outages." You can argue about the cause later. I'm going to stop here for a moment and listen, because Hank is waving at me. He is pointing to the receiver side. That means someone else is trying to come through. We will take it if we can. All right, we have another caller. This one is from North Carolina, from a man named Sean Bradley. He says he is a paramedic in Wilmington. He says they are already dealing with flooding in places that should not be flooding on the current posted tide. Sean, go ahead. My name is Sean Bradley. I am a paramedic in Wilmington, North Carolina. I have worked hurricanes. I have worked fireworks accidents. I have worked normal bad nights when people do dumb things. This is different because it feels organized in the worst way. We started getting calls earlier today about water on roads near the Cape Fear River. At first, it sounded like normal nuisance flooding, but the timing did not fit. Then we got a call from a nursing home that sits near a low area. They said their access road was taking on water. That road usually floods with big storms, not on a random clear day. We called dispatch to ask if there was an advisory. Dispatch said no, nothing official, just monitor conditions. Then, while we were on the phone, dispatch got a message that they were not supposed to say the word tide in public radio traffic. They were told to say water level issue. That is an exact instruction. I heard it. We did a transport and had to reroute twice because water was up over the curb in spots that were dry earlier. We also had a weird call for a sinkhole swallow on a residential street. Not huge, big enough to take a front tire. People were out there filming and joking. Then the edge crumbled more, and a guy almost fell in because he wanted a better angle. I do not know what is causing it. I am not here to argue with a professor. I am here to say this is real on the ground. If you live in Wilmington, stay off the low roads near the river. If you live on the barrier islands, I do not care what the internet says. Do not wait. Move inland if you can. Also, if you rely on medical devices or oxygen, you need a plan for power. We are already seeing outages flicker and come back, and every flicker causes more calls. People are scared, and they do not have to say it. I can hear it when they describe the lights doing that stutter thing. I am going to end with this. If you are listening and you can help your neighbors, do it now while roads are still passable. Once it gets chaotic, it is too late to be a good person with a pickup truck. Sean is off. That instruction he mentioned, do not say tide, lines up again. It is everywhere. I'm going to keep broadcasting. If the moon stops descending, if this stabilizes, then this becomes a record of the strangest week in human history and a case study in how fragile our information systems are. If it does not stabilize, then this is the early chapter. I am hearing a lot of you in my head right now. The ones who will say, "Aaron, why would anyone censor this? People can see the ocean." I agree. You can see the ocean. You can also be convinced the ocean is doing a weird one-off thing and go back to work. You can be convinced it is just weather. You can be convinced you should stay put. Control the story, and you control the timing of mass movement. That matters to governments, to markets, to whoever thinks they can manage crowds by delaying the truth. I do not want to turn this into a rant. I also refuse to pretend it is not happening. Mira just stepped outside for a second to look up without screens. She came back in and said, "It looks the same, and that scares me more." What she meant is simple. People will wait for the sky to look wrong. The danger will build before the sky looks wrong. We are going to keep this going. If you can hear us and you have first-hand reports of water behavior, ground failures, infrastructure issues, or censorship effects, keep your message specific. Tell us your location, what you saw when you saw it, and what the conditions were. Wind, rain, clear, whatever. Details beat fear every time. I'm going to end this segment with the latest measured update from our instruments, spoken plainly. At 12:14 in the morning local time on Mount Lemmon, our measured lunar position continues to lead predicted values. Our measured apparent size continues trending upward beyond the normal monthly variation we expected. Our seismometer continues showing increased long-period ground motion consistent with stronger tidal forcing. I hate saying it, but I will keep saying it. The moon is coming closer, and the Earth is reacting.